Of course, people in general, they first feel the economic consequences because we had both the sanctions impact and just the impact of all the Western business leaving the country, all other negative economic effects. And this is what people notice, even if indirectly. If they see rising prices in shops, it's not like everybody would immediately think of Ukraine. But still, you kind of understand that the country is passing through a difficult period, even if you don't care at all about politics, even if you are unable to build those connections between Ukraine and your own well-being. Even then, you feel like things are not at the best, in the best of shapes, and they get worse and worse. Just
Yeah.
from one day to another, you have rising prices and all that. But in broader terms, I think most people, they of course hear about the events in Ukraine, but the majority still relies on what they learn from the state TV, which is one kind of picture and attitude that they receive. And you have those who use a broader set of sources, and they have a different picture, not necessarily make different conclusions, but at least they get more information, of course, primarily via the internet. The internet sources were hit by recent censorship measures. So this will also influence at least some part of the population that is not able or willing to overcome all those censorship restrictions. So it's definitely not a normal feeling that you have here, but at the same time, many people, they try to keep living as they did before the war started.
Sergei, how do you feel about this war?
Well, I feel that this is a catastrophe for both Ukraine and Russia. That was also my feeling before, and that was the reason for me to think that this kind of open conflict between Ukraine and Russia would be impossible. So I did not believe that it would happen until it did. And now you have all those dire consequences that I more or less could imagine, and that led me to this idea that President Putin couldn't take this kind of decision because he had to understand that this will hit the country, the economy that he was trying to strengthen for many years greatly. And whatever you could think of his moves politically in terms of suppressing democracy and other things, he was always quite serious about keeping the economy stable. And this is what many people saw as his major achievement, that he stabilized the economy, he ensured some level of economic growth, probably not in the last 10 years or so, but still people felt like living at the time of Putin was way better economically than what they remembered from the 90s. And now all that was gambled on Ukraine. And so far, it looks like even if there is some kind of political gain that President Putin will be able to sell to the people, it will not be the well-being. It will not be prosperity anytime soon. On the contrary, it will be a period of hardship as a trade-off against some ideological, if you like, gains, which is not exactly the kind of social contract that most people believed Putin had with the population.
You are speaking out about this, and the Kremlin has made it clear that it doesn't want people to speak out about this. Are you concerned at all about your safety and that of others who've spoken out?
Well, there are risks, but so far I had no pressure against me personally. I think it's not like everyone who is just expressing opinion gets into trouble. Often depends on work environment, like what kind of job people have. And I'm just happy to have the leadership in our research institute who understand that in a research institute, you are supposed to have different opinions on things. Of course, there are also limits, and if you start protesting on the streets, you will definitely get into trouble because we have all those pandemic regulations in force that basically prohibit any street protest. But if you just express your opinion about a political decision, I think this is still allowed, at least so far.
Yeah.
What the new legislation prohibited is what they call discreditation of armed forces. Of course, this can be interpreted very widely, but it is a piece of legislation that is hitting more seriously journalists who try to figure out what's happening on the ground. They have to report what they see, and if there is a gap between what they see and what the official sources tell you, like Russian official sources, you may indeed get into trouble in accordance with this law. But if you just have an opinion that this whole thing is wrong politically, my interpretation that this is possible.
So you mentioned a little earlier in our conversation that um, uh, the state TV is pushing the state TV, the Kremlin line. Yesterday, there was a very public display of disagreement by a producer at, I think it was Russia's TV1. And I'm just wondering, we've been told that, her situation, she was arrested, obviously, and tried already within a day. But I'm just wondering, do you think that may make a difference in the people's minds who have not or were not aware of this war or didn't believe that there was a war? Do you think that would make a difference?
Well, probably not that much of a difference among people who did not know, but it definitely cheered up those who spoke against the war or who definitely believed that something wrong is happening. So they already felt very depressed, and they felt like you couldn't do anything to change what's going on. And suddenly this woman appears on TV screen everywhere, and people probably thought, hey, there are still things that can be done, and even those who work in the state propaganda machinery, they could do that. But of course, this is just a standalone incident. This woman, she was so far released because she has small children she has to care for. So that was basically the reason why she was not kept under arrest for a longer time. But she may still experience serious troubles with the law because of what she did, and this would be used as a message to others: don't follow her. So as a standalone incident that made people feel you can indeed protest in some meaningful way and reach a wider audience, it mattered. But whether you can change people's mood and understanding of things, I doubt that.
So there's another thing that's taking place too. In a conversation earlier in the week with some U.S. government officials, it was pointed out that Russia's economy, as you've alluded to, is not in a really good place right now. There's some talk that it might default, the central bank, et cetera, very soon, maybe as soon as tomorrow or this week. What do you believe is or are the possible options for the Kremlin, President Putin? What might be done if that takes place? What's going to be the reaction, do you think?
Well, I'm not an economist myself, but from what I hear from the economists, I understand that most of the consequences that matter for ordinary people, let's put it this way, already happened. You had a very serious drop of ruble rate vis-a-vis euro and dollar. Then the central bank basically prohibited to exchange rubles to dollars and euros officially via the banking system. People can do it sort of among themselves, but not in a regular civilized way that they could just before. They cannot get from their bank accounts in euros or dollars anything but dollars in the amount up to 10,000 for the next 6 months. So not every month, but for the next 6 months, they can only withdraw this amount in dollars. The rest is only in rubles. So this degree of flexibility that exists because Russia has its own currency and the government can do a lot of things with it. But for foreign investors and for foreign creditors, this all can be serious because the Russian government is basically saying if we owe you anything, under the current conditions when the US and the EU decided not to deliver to us their euro notes and dollar notes and restrict all our economic activities, we can only offer you rubles. If you don't like that, well, nothing else we can do. And then you can end up with Russia being brought to courts everywhere because of that. Will not be easy, but of course, these kind of trials is not exactly what people on the street think about, and then it will not be that hard to sell them this process as another proof that the West is just so anti-Russian and they want to get money from Russia while they deprive Russia itself of operating even with its central bank reserves. So in terms of people's reaction, you can sell it, but in terms of business relations with Russia, any kind of foreign business, any kind of foreign creditors, this could constitute a serious trouble.
One more thing I'd like to ask you, and then I'll ask any thoughts you have. What would it take to end this war from what you know, and what kind of support does the inner circle of Mr. Putin, what kind of support does he have amongst those folks for this war?
I think he still has his team around him, so they have basically no other choice by now, probably, rather than to support him, or at least this is the impression that you get. You never know what can happen within the black box, but on the surface, you don't really see reasons to believe there is some strong discontent that can influence the course of events. Although, of course, you have rich people who lost money on their yachts and their villas, but that was the first thing that Putin tried to achieve when he just came to power in early 2000s, to make those rich people understand that they will not be true oligarchs, that they will not influence political decisions, that they will have their room of maneuver to earn money, but for that they will have to stay away from power. That was the key message of this Khodorkovsky process in the past. So it's not easy to imagine that you'd have indeed some kind of palace coup, as people speculate these days, something like that. In terms of the possible outcomes of this war and how it could end, I'd say myself, I don't see good scenarios for Russia. But that is, if you look at losses and gains in material terms. So we will live a life that will be significantly less good than what we had just before the war in material terms. But then one might think of sort of ideological gains, which to me seems the only explanation why President Putin could take this decision, that he decided that he couldn't just pursue economic prosperity, that he had this historical task of establishing Russia as a standalone global center of power that is separate from the West, that is not guided by what the West is telling you, that is able to stand up to any kind of external pressure, and that is able to establish control over its periphery, or as Mr. Putin probably sees that, this greater Russia that the Russian Empire was, and then the Soviet Union as just another form of this greater Russia. Probably he doesn't really have the goal of rebuilding the Soviet Union indeed in the old borders, because that would mean Central Asia, which is quite strong demographically and would just create a trouble for Russia potentially. But he might indeed be very serious about this idea that he promoted through his articles, that Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, they are one people, are divided unjustly, unlawfully at the collapse of the Soviet Union. And all those national elites of Belarus and Ukraine, they can be sort of reinterpreted, and they are reinterpreted now as nationalists who are just on the wrong path and who forgot about this unity of nations that has to exist. And then he could sort of aim at reshaping the country as a global center of power of some 200 million people, with a very strong idea as something that drives people together, idea rather than prosperity and the power, the center of power that is separate from the West. This could be his ideological concept that many people believed for a long time was just a smokescreen for other more important things that he was probably focusing on. But by now it's very hard to interpret what he's doing if you do not refer to this ideological layer of his political thinking.
Sergei, we're going to have to leave it there. I've got a broadcast coming up shortly. I thank you for your time this evening, and I'm hopeful that we can stay in touch and I can join you again soon. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your bravery, and good luck and stay safe.
Thank you. Take care.